ducks, there's some kind of bell going off in my apartment building right now, but we're just gonna ignore that. I hope everyone has been having a splendid poetry month. Today we're going to talk about poetry and books and language and craft and literature, and here are 3 books that I highly recommend on those topics. These are all books that I've read repeatedly. I return to them for the insight that they provide. They are the first books that I recommend in workshops or to younger poets around me. But before we really detail these wonderful authors, why should anyone read books about poetry? Not even poetry itself, but books about poems. If you're just a reader in general, you'll start to view any piece of writing as a very large poem, which is gorgeous. Like, imagine flipping through a cookbook or flipping through a novel and giving it the same attention to detail and close reading as you would a sonnet. Speaking of sonnets, you'll probably have to take an English class at some point in your mortal life, so why not get a head start on trying to interpret whatever the heck these poets think they're saying? If you aren't a poet but you are a writer, there are so many wonderful lessons to be grabbed from poetry, such as economy of language, really intense sentence construction, teaches you to be really specific. I like to think of myself as a writer across genre, and I find poetry really useful because it feels looser and more conceptual, and I'm able to skip through my ideas and not have to make as many logical connections necessarily. Like, imagine that I'm walking across a river by jumping onto really large rocks, whereas an essay should be a well-laid brick path. I'm realizing that the books I picked for today are all yellow. They are also all by poets that I greatly admire, which is a really wonderful starting point. If there's a writer that you really like, see if they've delved into criticism at any point and gobble that up. Starting off with the oldest, which is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. This book is legendary and useful. I've talked about it before, but basically this kid wrote Rainer Maria Rilke just out of the blue asking for poetry advice. Rilke responded, and they began this most precious correspondence. Just a guy talking about life and his many feelings. What's better than that? And in between all the philosophical musings, there's really nice bits of writing advice. I have copied your sonnet because I found that it is lovely and simple and born in the form in which it moves with such quiet decorum. And now I give you this copy because I know that it is important and full of new experience to come upon a work of one's own again, written in a strange hand. Read the lines as though they were someone else's, and you will feel deep within you how much they are your own. So if you want to extract that and bring it to your writing group or poetry club or what have you, and you just write out each other's works, that would be so fun. Community bonding. Thank you, Rainer. Next is Mary Oliver's Guide to Craft, her poetry handbook. Mary Oliver is absolutely prolific. I don't even know how many books she's published. It's a very large number. If you're studying literature at all, then you better read this because it is the nuts and bolts of poetry and how to construct a line, and she breaks it down very easily into devices of sound, the syllable, what is a rhyme, and she makes it very accessible that no matter how much or how long you've studied these things, you'll be able to understand what she's saying in an instant, in a couple pages. I appreciate her simple explanations because sometimes when poets talk about poetry, they get very poetic about it. You know, you ask them, what's a syllable? And they say, a syllable is a candle that I hold at the edge of the shoreline so that ships in the dark ocean can see me waving it and know the safe way home, and then I put the candle in the ocean and then the flame goes out, and that's what a syllable is. Like, I understand the impulse to describe reality with impossible things, but it is also incredibly confusing. When Mary Oliver wants to describe the effect of poetry, she still keeps the descriptions very grounded. For instance, the reader will hurry twice as fast over the obstacle of a pause because it is there. We leap with more energy over a ditch than over no ditch. Mary Oliver is also great because she's just an old lesbian living in the woods with her cool nature photographer wife. What more could a person want? Finally, June Jordan's last book of essays, Some of Us Did Not Die. It has samples of her work across her career, and she is so skilled across genres that it's a joy to read anything that she wrote. The work that she did in urban design, in language, the work that she did as a teacher is incredible, and I'm going to recommend 4 essays from this book in particular that you might be able to find online. Nobody Mean More to Me Than You and the Future Life of Willie Jordan. The Difficult Miracle of Black Poetry in America, or something like a sonnet for Phyllis Wheatley, Problems of Language in a Democratic State, and For the Sake of People's Poetry, Walt Whitman and the Rest of Us. These 4 essays in particular tackle the politics of language and poetry in America, and sometimes in her essays she will just incorporate lines of her poetry and explain what she meant or use it as a jumping point to another topic, or sometimes it just feels like the logical next phrase for what she's talking about. This is a national disgrace. This is a soft-spoken emergency. This is a colossal loss of life, lost to a colossal absence of uncontrollable, serious, coast-to-coast, around-the-clock, know-nothing as usual outcry and civil and uncivil disobedience. This isn't quite a memoir, but she does get quite personal in some of her essays, and I want to say something about the memoirs of writers in general. This is gonna sound goofy, but I will explain myself. So the memoirs of writers are really useful because you get to see how writers live. Yes, that's exactly what a memoir is, but for writers, you get to see what their process was like, how they made a living, what side jobs they had to fund their creative work, how their family was able to support them. All of these things are really useful bits of knowledge if you're trying to make writing your livelihood. So these are my favorite books about poetry from some of my favorite poets, and today's fact is that if one more person asks me what I think I'm gonna do with an English degree after I graduate college, then I'm gonna tell them. Also, I did a little something with Teen Vogue for National Poetry Month. It's really cute and quick, so the video is linked in the description. I hope you enjoy it. I feel so cute just watching the video myself. So that's all for me. I'm gonna go make some tea and do my physical therapy exercises. Later, nerds!